AITA for telling my parents they could live with my golden child. Instead, everyone in my family says I abandoned my parents. My phone hasn't stopped ringing for days. My aunts call me ungrateful. My cousins say I'll regret this forever. But none of them were there for the last 15 years. I'm 34 years old. My younger brother Ryan is 30. Growing up, Ryan could do no wrong. If he failed a class, my parents blamed the teacher. If I got straight A's, they asked why I wasn't first in the entire school. When I got my first job at 16, every paycheck went toward helping with bills. Ryan spent his weekends playing video games. My parents called him the baby. After college, I worked 2 jobs to pay off my student loans. Ryan dropped out after 1 semester. My parents said college wasn't for everyone. Then they bought him a brand new truck. I bought my own 10-year-old Honda with cash. When I got married, my wife and I saved for years to buy a small home. Meanwhile, my parents emptied part of their retirement fund so Ryan could start a business. The business lasted 8 months. The money disappeared. No one ever asked him to pay it back. 3 years later, my parents retired. They hadn't saved enough. Guess who they called? Me, not Ryan, even though he'd received hundreds of thousands of dollars in help over the years. They asked if I could temporarily cover their mortgage. Temporary became 6 years. Every month I paid their mortgage, utilities, and groceries. I never complained. They were my parents. Then one Sunday, I visited for dinner. Ryan was there too. He had just bought a brand new luxury SUV. I congratulated him. Then I asked the obvious question. So, are you helping mom and dad now? The room went silent. Ryan laughed. Nah, they know you're better with money. My parents laughed too, as if it were the funniest joke they'd ever heard. That was the exact moment something inside me broke. Not because of the money, because I realized they never expected Ryan to help. They expected me to sacrifice forever. I drove home in complete silence. That night, my wife looked at me and quietly asked, "When does it end?" I didn't have an answer. But 2 weeks later, my parents gave me one, and it changed everything. 2 weeks later, my mom called. Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. "Can you come over tonight? We have something important to discuss." I thought maybe they had finally figured out their finances. Maybe Ryan had decided to help. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I arrived, Ryan was already sitting at the kitchen table smiling. Dad slid a folder toward me. "We've been thinking about the future." I opened it. It was a floor plan of my house. At first, I didn't understand. Then Mom pointed to the upstairs bedroom. "We'll take this one." I stared at her. "What?" Dad smiled. "We've decided we're moving in with you." Not asking. Deciding. I laughed because I honestly thought they were joking. No one else laughed. Ryan leaned back in his chair. "It just makes the most sense." I looked at him. "So you're taking them in?" He almost looked offended. "No, my condo's too small." His condo had 3 bedrooms. Mine had 4. But somehow that made me responsible. Mom reached across the table. "You have more space," Dad added. "And your wife works from home anyway. It'll be nice for her to have company." Couldn't believe what I was hearing. No one had asked my wife. No one had asked me. They had already planned where their furniture would go. Mom even had a list of renovations they wanted me to pay for. A walk-in shower, new kitchen cabinets, a stair lift. The estimate? Almost $48,000. I quietly closed the folder. "I can't do that." The room instantly changed. Mom's smile disappeared. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this is our home. You never even asked us." Dad frowned. "Why would we ask? We're family." I took a deep breath. "Ryan can help." Ryan laughed. "I've got my own life." I looked directly at him. "So do I." For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then Mom slammed her hand on the table. "After everything we've done for you." I almost laughed. Done for me. I remembered buying groceries when I was 19, paying their mortgage, covering medical bills, fixing their roof, replacing their furnace. Every vacation I'd canceled because someone in my family needed help. And suddenly, I wasn't angry anymore. I was exhausted. I stood up. If living with family is so important, I looked directly at Ryan. "You should move in with your favorite son." The room froze. Ryan immediately stood up. "Don't drag me into this." I smiled for the first time all evening. I didn't. "You volunteered yourself years ago." Mom burst into tears. Dad pointed toward the door. "If you leave now, don't expect us to forgive you." I nodded. I've spent 15 years earning forgiveness for things I never did. I'm done. I walked out. As I drove home, my phone started ringing. First Mom, then Dad, then Ryan, then my aunt, then my uncle. By the time I got home, I had 37 missed calls. But the next morning, something happened that I never expected. Someone had posted about me online. And suddenly, thousands of strangers thought I was the worst son in America. By the next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Text messages, Facebook notifications, even people I hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out. My aunt had posted a long message online. According to her, I had thrown my elderly parents out on the street. She conveniently forgot to mention one important detail. They had never lived with me, and they weren't homeless. They were still living in the same house I'd been paying for. Within hours, distant relatives started attacking me. "I hope your kids treat you the same way someday. Money changed you. Family should always come first." I read every comment. Not one person asked from my side of the story. When I got to work that morning, my boss called me into his office. "I saw what's happening online," he said. My heart sank. Then he smiled. "I don't believe everything I read." I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. That evening, I opened my banking app. For the first time, I added everything together. 6 years of mortgage payments, electric bills, groceries, medical expenses, home repairs. The total made me stare at the screen. $214,763. Over $200,000. I showed the number to my wife. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she quietly asked, "If your brother had helped with even half of this, where would we be today?" I already knew the answer. We would have paid off our own house years ago. We could have traveled, started the business we'd always dreamed about. Instead, Every extra dollar had disappeared into my parents' home. The next afternoon, Dad called. His voice was unusually calm. Can we meet? Against my wife's advice, I agreed. We met at a small diner. Dad looked older than I remembered. He stirred his coffee without saying a word. Finally, he looked up. I didn't know you'd spent that much. I slid printed bank statements across the table. Every payment, every receipt, every transfer. He flipped through the pages in silence. Then he whispered, I had no idea. A few minutes later, Mom and Ryan walked in. Apparently, Dad had invited them without telling me. Ryan glanced at the papers and rolled his eyes. So what? So? I repeated. You've never paid a single mortgage payment. You've never bought groceries. You've never paid one medical bill. Ryan shrugged. Nobody asked me. That sentence echoed in my head. Nobody asked me. For years, nobody had asked me either. They had simply expected it. I stood up. I looked at my parents, then at Ryan. I've made my decision. Starting next month, I'm not paying another dollar. The color drained from Mom's face. Dad looked down at the table. Ryan laughed. You won't actually do it. I looked him straight in the eyes. Watch me. I walked out of the diner. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't carrying my family's financial burden anymore. But 3 days later, there was a loud knock on my front door. When I opened it, my parents were standing there with 4 suitcases, and behind them, a moving truck was pulling into my driveway. The moving truck stopped right in front of my house. 4 movers jumped out and started unloading boxes. I walked outside, completely confused. My mom smiled. We're here. I looked at the truck. What do you mean you're here? Dad avoided eye contact. Ryan wasn't anywhere to be seen. Mom held up a spare key. I still have the key you gave us years ago. Before I could react, one of the movers carried a box toward my front door. I stepped in front of him. I'm sorry, but no one is moving into this house. The mover looked uncomfortable. Sir, they told us this was already arranged. It wasn't. He immediately stopped unloading. Mom's face turned bright red. You can't embarrass us like this. I stayed calm. No, you embarrassed yourselves by hiring movers before asking permission. Just then, my wife walked outside. She quietly stood beside me. Without saying a word, she slipped her hand into mine. That gave me all the confidence I needed. I looked at my parents. I love you both, but this house is my family's home. You cannot move in. Mom started crying. Dad looked completely defeated. Then Ryan finally arrived. Not to help, to convince me. He walked over and whispered, just let them stay for a while. I looked at him. You have a 3-bedroom condo. They can stay with you. He immediately shook his head. That won't work. Why not? He hesitated. Then he admitted something none of us expected. Because I already rented out my spare rooms to make extra money. The entire street went quiet. Mom slowly turned toward him. You, what? Ryan shrugged. I needed the income. Dad stared at him in disbelief. So, you had room. You just didn't want us? For the first time in my life, the spotlight wasn't on me. It was on Ryan. Mom began crying even harder. But you've always said you'd take care of us. Ryan looked away. I never actually met now. Dad sat down on one of the moving boxes. He looked completely exhausted. After a long silence, he turned to me. I'm sorry. I spent years expecting everything from you, and almost nothing from him. Those words meant more to me than he could ever know. I helped them cancel the moving company. Then I drove them back to their house. Not because I was giving in, but because they were still my parents. Over the next few months, something unexpected happened. Ryan finally started paying their bills. He sold his luxury SUV, moved into a smaller apartment. For the first time in his life, he experienced responsibility. My relationship with my parents slowly improved. Not overnight. Trust doesn't return that quickly. But things changed. Mom apologized for treating us differently. Dad admitted he'd taken the easy path for years by avoiding conflict. As for me, I finally stopped being the family's emergency wallet. I started putting that money into my own future. A year later, my wife and I paid off our house. We took our first real vacation together. And for the first time since I was 16, every paycheck belonged to us. Sometimes people ask if I regret saying no. Honestly, no. Because saying no didn't destroy my family. It forced my family to face the truth they had been avoiding for decades. So, AITA for telling my parents they could live with my golden child instead of me.